why aging makes sleep harder, and what Buddhism teaches us about it. There's something no one tells you about getting older. It's not just the wrinkles or the aching joints. It's the way sleep becomes more elusive. You lie in bed, weary to the bone, and yet your mind feels wide awake. Not sharp, just full. Of memories, of unfinished stories, of worries that seem to speak louder in the dark. Is it just biology, or is there something deeper going on? Buddhism offers a quiet, unexpected answer. One that sees sleeplessness not only as a symptom of aging, but as a mirror of our relationship with control, with change, with letting go. Tonight, we'll explore why aging often steals our rest, and how Buddhist teachings can gently return it. Later in this video, you'll hear a story about a retired craftsman, a single breath, and a moment of surrender that brought sleep back after years of restlessness. If you've ever laid awake wondering why rest no longer comes easily, stay with me. And if this path of reflection speaks to something quiet in you, please consider subscribing. Each new subscriber helps this channel grow like a lotus in calm water, soft, steady, and full of light. Let's take this step together. Part 1. When the mind refuses to sleep. I used to believe that sleep was simple. You lie down, you close your eyes, and then, if your body is tired enough, you drift off. Easy, right? But then came the years when I was so exhausted I could barely speak. And still, I couldn't sleep. Have you ever felt that? That strange ache behind your eyes, the weight in your chest, your body pleading for rest. But your mind, your relentless, chattering mind, is wide awake, whispering worries, spinning scenarios, rehashing conversations, picking apart everything from what you said 5 years ago to what you forgot to do this morning. It's a peculiar kind of suffering, isn't it? To be tired and still awake. And so I found myself night after night staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the refrigerator in the next room, watching the shadows on the wall shift ever so slightly as the moon moved across the sky. Somewhere along the way, I began to suspect that this wasn't just about sleep. That perhaps insomnia, for many of us, isn't a physical issue, it's a spiritual one. A quiet signal from the soul that something hasn't been released, that we are, in some way, holding on. The Buddha spoke of dukkha, suffering, not as something that happens to us, but something that arises from within us. He taught that clinging, grasping, craving, these were the roots of our discontent. And not just clinging to things we can touch, but clinging to ideas, to thoughts, to control. And oh, how I clung to my to-do list, to expectations, to the illusion that I could keep everything from falling apart if I just stayed mentally on all the time. But minds aren't meant to be on forever. Even a candle burns out eventually. There's a story I love, one that gently found its way to me during a particularly restless year. It's the story of a farmer who came to the Buddha with a long face and heavy shoulders. He sat before the awakened one and poured out his heart. My crops are failing. My wife worries too much. My son doesn't listen to me. My body is aging. I can't sleep. I'm afraid I won't be able to provide for my family. The Buddha listened with soft eyes and patient silence. And then he said, I cannot take your problems away. The farmer blinked, confused. But, the Buddha added, I can help you see them differently. You see, everyone has 83 problems. And even if you solve one, another will arise. The key is not to eliminate them, but to stop suffering over them. When I first heard that, I laughed a little. Not because it was funny, but because it was so painfully true. You solve the money problem and then your health acts up. You fix the health issue and suddenly you're lonely. You mend your relationships and then something breaks in the world around you. Life is, in many ways, a continuous unfolding of 83 problems. And when we demand that the night be perfect and quiet and free from any inner turbulence before we can rest, we're basically asking life to stop being life. I began to realize, maybe it's not the problems themselves keeping me awake. Maybe it's my resistance to them, my unwillingness to let go for just one night, to trust that I can put the load down, just until morning. That shift alone changed something deep inside me. Let me paint you a picture. There's an old man, I imagine him in his late 70s. Let's call him Mr. Nakamura. Every night, he lies in his modest room. It's quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't comfort but echoes. He watches the ceiling fan spin. He counts his breath, tries to anyway, but the thoughts keep coming. Did I say something wrong to my daughter today? Did I forget to pay the electric bill? What if something happens to me and no one finds out for days? He's not trying to worry. He's trying to sleep. But the mind doesn't care. It latches on. One thought becomes 5, 5 become 20. He sighs deeply, turns to one side, then the other. He stares at the wall and whispers into the dark, "Please, just let me sleep." But sleep does not come to pleading. Sleep comes to surrender. And Mr. Nakamura hasn't learned to surrender yet. I tell you this because I was Mr. Nakamura. Maybe you are too. The thing is, no one teaches us how to rest the mind. We learn how to work it, how to sharpen it, how to analyze and plan and remember. But no one sits us down and says, "Here's how you gently release the day. Here's how you let go of what cannot be solved tonight." I remember one evening, sitting outside on the porch, the night air thick with stillness. I was watching the leaves of a nearby tree flutter under the street lamp, their movements so soft, so rhythmic, as if the tree itself was breathing. I suddenly wondered, how does it do that? Stand there so peacefully, night after night? Then it hit me. The tree isn't fighting the night. It's not wondering about the next storm or regretting the last one. It's just being rooted, present, alive. And for a brief, sacred moment, I stopped thinking. I felt something loosen inside me, like a knot beginning to untie. That's what presence feels like. And presence is the doorway to rest. When I work with people now, friends, students, family, I often ask them a simple question before bed. What are you still holding on to tonight? Try it now. Ask yourself. Maybe it's something small. A task you didn't finish, an awkward comment from earlier, a feeling of not doing enough. Maybe it's something heavier. Grief, fear, resentment. Whatever it is, imagine just for tonight that you can place it down. Not forever, just until morning. Imagine setting it on a low wooden table beside your bed. The kind you might find in an old temple guest house. You don't destroy it. You don't deny it. You just release it. And in that space, between holding and letting go, something sacred enters. The possibility of peace. Thoughts are like waves, yes, but they are also like clouds. They pass. They always do. Even the stormiest night eventually clears. I've come to believe that the goal isn't to stop thinking. That's a losing game. The goal is to change our relationship with the thoughts. Instead of grabbing onto them, we let them drift. Instead of judging them, we watch them. Instead of demanding silence, we welcome stillness. Stillness doesn't mean the world stops moving. It means you're no longer spinning with it. And that, my friend, is the difference between lying awake and lying at peace. Tonight, you may still feel the current of thoughts moving through you. That's okay. You're human. But perhaps now, instead of struggling against it, you can float with it. Gently, like a lotus leaf on a calm pond. You deserve rest. Not because you finished everything. Not because the world is perfect. You deserve rest because you are alive. Because your breath is still moving. Because even now, even in this moment of vulnerability and fatigue, your presence matters. So as you lay down tonight, may you feel the quiet support of the earth beneath you. May you hear the soft lullaby of your breath. May you remember that you don't have to carry everything. Not now. Not tonight. Let the thoughts come. Let them go. And somewhere, in the hush between one breath and the next, may sleep find you like a friend returning home. Part 2, the gentle art of letting go. There's a moment each night, quiet and almost sacred, when the day loosens its grip on the world. The traffic dies down, screens go dim, and the air cools just slightly, brushing your skin like the breath of a gentle evening prayer. It's in that moment, when the body starts to slow but the mind refuses to follow, that we meet the true challenge of sleep. I used to believe I needed to work my way into sleep, like there was some secret combination of tricks I hadn't yet mastered. I tried everything. Warm milk, soft music, digital detoxes, even turning my pillow to the cooler side as if that might lull me into rest. But the real reason I couldn't sleep was simpler and deeper. I was full, not physically, mentally. It felt like I was carrying a backpack stuffed with unfinished thoughts, half-felt emotions, and little pockets of guilt or worry I hadn't sorted through. Even after I'd taken off my shoes and brushed my teeth, I was still lugging around the weight of the day. And I know now that many of us do the same. We climb into bed physically undressed, but mentally overpacked. It wasn't until I learned the quiet, radical act of letting go that things began to shift. Not just in my sleep, but in my spirit. There's an image that often comes to mind when I think about mental clutter. A small tea house in the mountains. It's early evening. The paper walls glow with lantern light. Steam rises gently from a kettle. And in that peaceful, wooden space, thoughts are like guests entering through a sliding door. Some arrive politely, a memory from a lovely lunch, a child's laughter echoing from the afternoon. Others, however, barge in loudly, still carrying the dust of the outside world. Resentments, regrets, fears dressed in muddy boots. You are the host. You decide which thoughts stay and which ones are kindly shown to the door. Eleanor didn't know this yet when her sleepless nights first began. I met her during a mindfulness retreat I was guiding years ago, and she sat in the front row with her shoulders high and her hands always clutching a tissue, as if bracing herself for life. She had lost her husband 2 winters prior. Since then, her nights had been long, jagged things. She described lying in bed, completely still on the outside, but inside, she was sifting through everything. Conversations from decades ago, hospital visits, missed opportunities, apologies never spoken out loud. I feel like my thoughts are sitting on my chest, she said softly one evening, and I don't know how to ask them to leave. Her words struck something deep in me, because how often do we, too, let thoughts take up residence in us? Loud, pushy guests we didn't invite, who won't leave politely. That night, we tried something small. I handed Eleanor a notebook and invited her, just before bed, to write it all down. Not to fix anything, not to organize, just to put it somewhere else besides her mind. She hesitated. What if I don't know what to write? Start with what you feel, I said. Even if it's, I'm tired and I don't want to think anymore. Just give the thoughts a place to rest. The next morning, she looked lighter. I slept, she whispered, almost in disbelief. Not all night, but better. Writing, it turns out, is not just a tool for writers. It's a tool for release. When we put our worries down on paper, we are symbolically taking them out of our mental backpack. We don't deny them. We simply stop carrying them alone. This became Eleanor's ritual. Each evening, she would pour a cup of tea, always chamomile, always in the same chipped white mug, and sit at her little table. She'd light a candle, open her notebook, and gently ask herself, what am I holding on to tonight? Sometimes it was a memory, sometimes a fear, sometimes just a list of errands she didn't get done. She'd write them all down, close the notebook, and whisper to herself, I'll return to this tomorrow, but tonight I choose to rest. Simple, profound. There's a certain peace that comes from knowing not everything must be solved right now. That's one of the deepest misunderstandings of modern life, isn't it? That urgency equals importance. That if something is on our mind, it must be fixed, handled, conquered immediately. But not everything is urgent. Not everything is yours to carry, especially not at midnight. There's another practice I sometimes use, especially on nights when writing feels like too much. I close my eyes and imagine I'm standing beside a calm river. The moon is full. The air smells faintly of cedar and wet earth. In my hands, I'm holding a small paper lantern. I place a single worry inside, just one, and gently lower it onto the surface of the water. The lantern begins to drift, carried by the current. Slowly, gracefully, it moves away. I watch until its glow is just a flicker in the distance. Then I do it again, one by one, letting each thought go, and not because it's unimportant, but because tonight I deserve peace more than resolution. This kind of visualization is not about escaping life. It's about trusting that not all action happens through effort. Sometimes, letting go is the most courageous action we can take. You see, we've been taught that surrender is weakness, that stopping is failure, but the Dharma teaches otherwise. In Buddhism, letting go isn't giving up. It's giving space. It's the difference between clenching your fist and opening your hand. The problem might still be there in the morning, but now there's room for breath, for clarity, for rest. And the beautiful thing is, the more you practice this, the easier it becomes. Like muscle memory, the mind learns that night is not for solving. Night is for softening. There are a few gentle mantras I like to repeat to myself on nights when the thoughts come knocking a little too loudly. Maybe they'll help you too. I release this day. I have done enough. Now I rest. And if that still feels like too much, try this one. Just this breath. Just this moment. I once watched a monk in northern Thailand fold his robes at dusk. It was such a slow, deliberate act. He smoothed each crease, aligned each corner. When I asked him why he did it with such care, he smiled and said, "I fold my day like I fold my robe, with intention so I may leave it behind." That image stayed with me. Every night as we prepare to rest, we have the opportunity to fold our day. Not crumple it, not rush it, but honor it with gentleness and let it go. And so, if you're lying in bed tonight and your mind is restless, know that you don't have to fix anything right now. You don't even have to stop thinking. You just have to soften, to exhale, to imagine that your thoughts are visitors in the tea house of your heart. Some will pass through, others may linger, but ultimately you get to decide who stays. So go ahead, close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath, and if it feels right, let this be your intention. Tonight, I choose peace over control. Tonight, I place my thoughts in lanterns and watch them drift. Tonight, I whisper to myself, I'll meet this life again in the morning, but for now I rest. And if you can do that just once, just tonight, then you've already begun. You've taken the first step toward the kind of sleep that heals not just the body, but the soul. Part 3, following the breath back home. I used to think the breath was boring. Honestly, it seemed too simple to be sacred. It's just breathing, right? Something the body does automatically, like blinking or digestion. Why should I pay attention to something that's been happening without my permission since the moment I was born? But then came a night, a quiet one in the middle of winter, when I was lying awake yet again. My thoughts were loud. My heart was racing, but not because I was afraid. It was just full of everything, like I had been carrying the weight of the world all day and then tried to lay it down. But my body didn't get the memo. I remember the sound of the radiator hissing gently beside the bed. I remember the moonlight tracing the shape of the curtain. I remember trying everything, turning the pillow, switching sides, counting sheep. Nothing worked. The mind was a monkey on a sugar rush. And then, for reasons I still don't fully understand, I placed one hand on my chest, one on my belly, and I just noticed how the chest barely rose, how shallow I was breathing, how far away I had drifted from the home inside my own body. So I breathed in slowly, counted to 4, then exhaled longer this time, 6 counts, and something shifted. It was small, subtle, but unmistakable. My shoulders softened, my jaw unclenched. The storm in my chest calmed just a little, like ripples on a pond settling after a stone had been thrown. That's when I began to understand, really understand, that the breath isn't just a function. It's a refuge, a rope we can hold onto when the mind is spinning, a gate we can walk through to return to stillness. In Buddhist teachings, there's a word for this, anapanasati. It means mindfulness of breath, and it's one of the oldest, simplest, and most profound practices the Buddha ever taught. Not because it's flashy, but because it's always with us. You don't need a meditation cushion or a fancy retreat or even a silent room to begin. You only need a willingness to pay attention, and the breath will do the rest. There's a man I once met in Kyoto. His name was Haruto. He was in his 70s then, retired, with hands that looked like they belonged to the trees. Knotted, strong, patient. For most of his life, he had been a woodworker. He carved intricate shapes from old cedar and hinoki, sometimes spending weeks on a single piece. Breathing, he told me one morning over tea, used to be like carving. Slow, intentional. You do it with the whole body. But after he stopped working, something shifted. Without the rhythm of carving, his nights became restless. He couldn't sleep. Not really. His body would lie still, but the thoughts would keep working. He tried warm baths, classical music, even drank that special banana tea his neighbor swore by. Nothing worked. Then one day his old friend, a Buddhist monk, visited and made him tea. They sat on the porch in silence, steam curling up into the cold morning air. After a while, the monk asked, "Did you have to think about how to drink that tea?" Haruto smiled. "No, I just did it." The monk nodded. Breathing is like that too. You don't have to force it. Just follow it. That night, Haruto lay down, placed one hand on his chest, one on his belly, like the monk showed him, and began to listen. Really listen. Not to his thoughts, but to the breath beneath them. Inhale 4 counts. Exhale 6 counts. Like ocean waves kissing the shore and slipping back out again. He repeated silently, with each breath, "I am here. I am safe," over and over, not as a chant, not as a magic spell, but as a reminder, a returning, a homecoming. And that night, sleep came quietly, like a cat curling up beside him. Not because he tried harder, but because he finally stopped trying. Haruto later told me, it wasn't about getting rid of the thoughts. It was about giving them a place to rest. That's what the breath does. It doesn't erase worry. It makes room for peace beside it. I often imagine the breath as a lantern floating across a still lake at dusk. Each inhale is the lantern lifting slightly. Each exhale is its slow drift toward the horizon. It's not rushing. It's not resisting. It's simply moving with the current. And in a world that asks us to do more, think more, be more, there's something revolutionary about choosing to just be with your breath. Sometimes, during meditation, I guide people through a short practice. Maybe you'd like to try it with me now. Let's begin gently. Place one hand on your chest. Feel the rise and fall. Then place the other on your belly. This is where the breath wants to go. Now close your eyes if it's safe to do so, or simply soften your gaze. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Slowly, gently count to 4. Now exhale through your mouth. Longer this time, count to 6. Feel your body settle. Feel the edges of your thoughts begin to blur, like ink in water. Now again, inhale, I am here. Exhale, I am safe. Again, inhale, I am here. Exhale, I am safe. No need to fight anything. No need to change anything. Just be here with this breath. If the thoughts come, let them. They're not the enemy. They're clouds in the sky of your awareness. Let them pass. The breath is the mountain. It does not move. And the more you return to it, the more the mind learns it's okay to rest. That it doesn't have to guard the gates all night. That you, this moment, this body, you're safe. From a psychological view, we know that slow, intentional breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the part of the body designed for rest, digestion, and healing. It lowers the heart rate, reduces blood pressure, signals safety. But from a spiritual view, it's even more profound. Because every breath is a reminder that you are alive, that you are still here, that despite all that the day held, all that your mind tried to manage, you are still breathing, still capable of returning to this quiet, present moment. And that is sacred. So tonight, if you find yourself tangled in thoughts, don't fight them. Don't force yourself to sleep. Just breathe. Let each breath be a soft invitation to come back to your body, to let go of tomorrow, to trust the quiet wisdom inside your chest. The breath knows the way home. Let it lead you there. Part 4, returning to the body, returning to peace. I used to believe my mind was the smartest part of me. It's where the plans happened, where the ideas lived, where the strategies formed. If I just thought hard enough, I'd figure life out. If I could just think better, I'd feel better too. But there came a point, Maybe you felt this too when my mind became too loud, too busy, too quick, and all I wanted was to turn it off just for a little while. Couldn't. Even lying still at night, my body heavy under the covers, the mind would keep spinning, sorting, replaying, forecasting, solving problems that hadn't happened yet, while ignoring the one problem I was actually facing. I couldn't rest, and in those moments I realized something. My body was exhausted, here, now, present, but my mind was still running laps in a stadium that had long since closed its gates. A teacher once told me, "The mind is like a puppy, curious, fast, easily distracted. You don't scold it for wandering. You guide it gently, again and again, until it learns to stay." I remember smiling when I heard that, because yes, my mind was exactly like that. A well-meaning, jittery little thing, constantly sniffing for problems to fix, unaware that it was tripping over the piece already available beneath its paws. That was when I began learning how to lead the mind home. Not with force, not with shame, but with the quiet wisdom of the body. I met Robert around that time, an older gentleman with soft, kind eyes and a restlessness that lived just beneath his skin. He had retired recently from a life of steady work, raising children, paying bills, meeting deadlines. He did everything right, but when the noise of routine finally stopped, the silence unsettled him. He came to one of our meditation circles, held in a small room just beside a garden. Nothing fancy. Tatami mats, incense curling lazily toward the ceiling, the faint rustle of bamboo leaves against the window pane. He told me later he didn't know why he came, just that he hadn't slept well in months, and that something about the stillness of the space made him feel like maybe, just maybe, it was okay to stop pretending he was fine. That night, after a short sit, we made tea together. Not in a rushed way, not in the way we usually do things, half listening, scrolling through our thoughts while water boils in the background. No, this was different. We stood there, side by side, holding ceramic cups. The steam rose between us like a breath neither of us had taken all day. "Feel the warmth," I said quietly. "Feel the cup in your hands, the curve of it, the heat seeping into your skin." He nodded. "Now take a sip, slowly, taste it." He did, and in that moment, the storm behind his eyes softened. I didn't say much else. I didn't need to. The body already knew what to do. You see, the body doesn't live in the past or future. It only knows this moment, this sip, this breath, this heartbeat. It's the mind that travels. The body stays rooted like a tree in the wind. And sometimes, the kindest thing we can do is return our mind to where the body patiently waits. That night, Robert asked me, "How do you sleep when your mind won't stop moving?" And I smiled. "I don't fight it," I said. "I come back to my body." He raised an eyebrow, unsure. So I guided him through a practice I still use every single night, something we often call a body scan. Though to me, it feels more like a prayer made of attention. If you'd like, we can try it now. No rush, just listen. First, find a comfortable position. Let your hands rest at your sides or on your belly. Take a slow breath in. Let it go. Now gently bring your awareness to your feet. Don't change anything. Just notice. Are they warm, cool, tense, tingling? Let them soften. Imagine your feet sinking into a warm pool of water, muscles unclenching, toes loosening, the ground holding you. Now move your attention up to your lower legs, your calves, your knees. Let the breath travel there, like a soft breeze. Invite them to relax. Continue upward to your thighs and hips. These parts of you carry so much movement, stillness, all the weight of the day. Offer them kindness. Let them rest. Now bring your awareness to your belly. Not to judge, not to suck in or hold, but to feel. Let it expand gently with the inhale. Release gently with the exhale. Let the breath be soft here, spacious. From your belly, move to your hands. Notice if they are clenched, cold, restless. Let them open slightly. Let the fingers release. Feel your arms, your shoulders, and imagine the burden sliding off. Like a backpack you didn't realize you were still carrying. Set it down. You don't need it here. Now the neck, the jaw. Let it soften. You don't need to hold words tonight. You don't need to prepare replies or apologies. Just rest. Finally, your face, the space around your eyes, the skin on your forehead. Let your features melt into calm. And at the very end, imagine a wave of golden light, or perhaps a breeze, the kind you feel in a temple garden in the late afternoon, moving slowly from the crown of your head, down your body, sweeping over you with tenderness. It doesn't need to fix you. It just wraps around you like warmth, like peace. When I finished this practice with Robert that first night, he didn't say anything. He just sat there for a moment, his eyes misty, his breath slow. I didn't know I was allowed to feel that, he said. That much calm. He began doing it every night. And over the weeks, something shifted. He still had thoughts, still had worries, but his relationship to them changed. He stopped wrestling them, stopped trying to outthink his way into sleep. Instead, he returned to his body, and eventually the mind followed. That's the truth I come back to again and again. When the mind is too loud, follow the breath. When the breath is too shallow, follow the body. And when you don't know where to begin, begin with sensation, something real, something present. We're so used to living in our heads, especially in this world, full of notifications and deadlines and noise. But the body speaks a different language. It speaks in warmth, in tingles, in weight and release. And if we listen, truly listen, we'll find that we are not broken. We're simply tired, and that the body, unlike the mind, never lies. It always tells us when it's time to rest. So tonight, as you lie down, don't ask your mind to be perfect. Don't ask it to be silent. Just ask it to come home. Bring it back to your feet, your breath, the space beneath your ribcage. Bring it back to the earth beneath you, the pillow that cradles you, the air that enters and leaves you again and again without effort. Because rest isn't something you chase, it's something you allow. And peace, it doesn't demand that you erase every thought. It only asks that you be present enough to feel the softness of your sheets, the rhythm of your breath, and the kindness that lives quietly in your own stillness. Let your body rest, and your mind will follow. Part 5. When sleep becomes sacred. I used to think rest was something you earned, that you had to exhaust yourself first, that you had to finish the to-do list, clean the house, fix the relationship, solve the problem. Only then could you lie down. Only then could you breathe. But over time, I've learned something different, something quieter, something truer. Rest isn't a reward. It's a rhythm, part of life, like the inhale and exhale, like day and night, like the tide that goes out and always returns. And sleep is not a pause from the spiritual path. It is the path, the soft, moonlit section of the path where the soul takes off its shoes, steps barefoot into the dark, and trusts the ground to still be there. It reminds me of a story I once heard in a monastery tucked between pine trees and river fog, where the days moved slowly and the bells rang like echoes from another world. There was a young monk, full of fire and intention. He had come to the temple to awaken, to meditate, to discipline the wild restlessness within him. And so he did what many of us do when we desperately want to evolve. He overdid it. He sat for hours, eyes closed, legs crossed, back straight, chasing enlightenment the way others chase promotions or approval. And at night, while the others lay down in silence, he stayed awake, forcing his eyes open with trembling fingers. One morning, pale and exhausted, he fell asleep sitting up. His master walked by, gently placed a shawl over his shoulders, and whispered something that still hums in my chest whenever I push myself too hard. "A string pulled too tight will snap," the teacher said, "and one too loose cannot play music. What you seek is balance." I think about that often when I'm lying in bed, scrolling through thoughts like tabs I forgot to close. And sometimes, without even realizing it, I whisper to myself, "Don't pull the string tonight, just breathe." Because what if rest isn't about giving up, but giving in? What if, instead of striving to finish the day, we honored it with a bow? The same way a monk bows before entering the meditation hall. The same way we bow to the sacred within us. I once met a woman, Maria, who reminded me of this sacredness. She had lived her life by the clock, woke early, worked tirelessly, gave everything to everyone. But now, in her 70s, she found herself lying awake night after night, wondering why her mind wouldn't settle. Her body was weary, her eyes burned with fatigue, but something inside her still felt unfinished. One evening, she sat under a banyan tree near her home. The moonlight made silver outlines on the leaves, and the breeze was warm, like a lullaby humming through the trees. She remembered something her grandmother used to say: "The moon does not rush to rise. The sun does not hurry to set, yet they are always on time." That night, Maria did something new. She lit a small candle beside her bed, not to see, but to soften. She wrapped herself in a shawl that smelled faintly of jasmine, and before lying down, she whispered, as if to herself, or maybe to the stars, "I surrender to stillness." She didn't fight the thoughts. She didn't chase sleep. She welcomed it, like a friend, like a lover, like a prayer. That night, she slept more deeply than she had in months. And the next morning, when she woke, she didn't feel like she had won at sleep. She felt like she had returned. That's what sacred rest feels like. A homecoming. You don't need to earn it. You only need to remember you're worthy of it. We've been told that sleep is passive, that it's wasted time, that productivity is the goal and rest is a weakness. But the Buddha never said, "Hurry." He never said, "Burn the candle at both ends." He said, "Rest your body, rest your mind, begin again." There's something so tender in that teaching, so human, because sometimes the most compassionate thing we can do is lie down with our pain, with our joy, with our confusion, and allow the body to do what it knows how to do: restore. I have a practice now. It's simple. I do it every night before bed. You're welcome to try it with me. I sit for just a minute, not in perfect posture. Sometimes I'm already under the covers, legs tangled in a blanket, and I close my eyes. I place one hand over my heart, one over my belly, and I speak quietly to myself, like a lullaby. I release this day with gratitude. I surrender to stillness. May my sleep be a temple. Some nights, that's all it takes. Other nights, my mind protests. It wants to solve something, fix something, rewind the tape and replay the words I wish I'd said better. That's okay. The point isn't to shut the mind up. The point is to be kind to it, to lead it home, to offer it the same forgiveness I'm still learning to offer myself. Because that's what spiritual practice is: not perfection, but presence. Not achievement, but acceptance. Sleep, too, is a teacher. It shows us that we don't always have to be awake to grow. That sometimes the deepest healing happens not when we're efforting, but when we're exhaling, when we're trusting. And in that trust, something ancient and wise stirs within us. Like a monk blowing out a candle at the end of a long day, darkness not as absence, but as invitation. A leaf doesn't apologize when it drifts onto still water. The sky doesn't ask permission to dim. Why should we? So tonight, maybe you can let yourself be part of that rhythm. Close the door gently behind you. Lay down not like someone escaping the world, but like someone returning to it more whole. Let your pillow hold your head like the lap of the earth. Let your breath be the wind through temple trees. Let your sleep be a sacred act. You don't need to reach enlightenment tonight. You just need to rest, because even the lotus folds at night, and still it blooms again at dawn. We often think sleep is the prize for a well-run day. But what if it's the practice, like folding your robe at dusk, like bowing before the temple gate? Rest can be a ritual of returning, not to escape the world, but to meet it more whole. You don't need to clear every thought. You don't need to finish the story in your head. You just need to close the book for now, because stillness is not the absence of thought. It's the space that holds it all gently. Tonight, may your sleep be soft, not because life is easy, but because you've learned the art of letting go. And when the morning light finds you, may you rise not hurried, but held. Tell me, what have you been carrying into the night that you might, just for tonight, set down? Share it with me below. Sometimes naming it is the first act of release. And if these teachings have brought you comfort, insight, or simply a quiet moment in your day, please consider subscribing. Each new subscriber is like another candle lit in this shared temple we're building together. Your presence gives me the strength to keep offering these gentle paths week after week. Until next time, may your breath lead you home, again and again.